It is that time again for another tier list. We've not long completed Final Fantasy VIII for the Platinum series. You can check the video just up there. So if you want to check that video out before you watch this, then feel free to do so. But we are ranking all of the playable characters in Final Fantasy VIII. And yes, that does include Edea, Seifer, and the Laguna trio, just to kind of make things a little bit more interesting and a few more things that we can talk about when it comes to this tier list. But a few things to note. I don't like to just base the tier list on combat abilities. I like to look at the character as a whole, what they brought to the table, how they made me feel, and how they overall added to the story. So you might agree with me, you might disagree with me, or we can just agree to disagree. Whatever the result, I hope that we can have a healthy discussion in the comment section below and overall have a good time. So with that all being said, what is up guys, Jen here, hope you're all doing well, welcome back to the channel, and yes, of course I've got you covered with timestamps in the description down below, so if you want to skip to a certain character and see where it ranks, feel free to do so. If you want to skip to the end of the video and see the overall ranking as we've ended it, then feel free to do that as well. Just don't go in that comment section and say that you disagree with me when you don't know the route that I took to get there. All I ask is for you to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you like the content, hit the notification bell if you want to be notified of that content, and of course get involved in the comment section down below. So let's just get straight into it. Let's switch scenes over to the tier list, and again I'm using the Record Keeper pixel art because I really like the art style and it just kind of brings my own little vibe to these tier list videos. So I've got these in what I believe to be the playable order that we encounter characters, but I'm sure there'll be someone there correcting me saying, nope, Rinoa's in the wrong place, you need to swap her. But this is what we're rolling with. And of course we are starting off with our main character, Squall. Now I have got another screen up here as well that I'm referring to when it comes to limit breaks, just so I can bear that in mind, because that's the only thing that really makes each character unique, because obviously the junction system, the draw system, all of the characters can be pretty much be the same when it comes to statistics, but the only thing that makes them different is the limit breaks, so we might as well consider those as we are ranking. So Squall, I think this is going to be no surprise if you've watched my Platinum series video, but he's going straight in S, and that's before I kind of talk about him, because I think, again, you know where I'm going to go with this one. It was one of the most relatable characters in Final Fantasy VIII for me. The way that he is always in his mind as opposed to being like in the room is very relatable for me, for my history when it comes to anxiety and just kind of, you know, not kind of saying what's on my mind and just keeping it in there. So it was really relatable, especially playing it through lately in my more adult years and understanding the character so much more. He isn't a moody bastard. He really just is thinking way too much, and that's just affecting him overall. And again, very relatable for me. And when it comes to limit breaks, he has pretty OP limit break. It's always fun to use, clicking that R1 button to kind of get the triggers off each time. And then when you get the extra chance of using an extra limit break on top of that, especially when it's Lionheart, which is like an OP Omni Slash, you know, you're in for a good time. So that's why he goes straight up there in S. So let's move over to Quistis, and Quistis is our blue mage, and I am a big fan of blue magic. If you've watched any of my videos for the Final Fantasy Platinum series so far, you'll understand that I really like blue magic. I like collecting them and I like using them. It was no difference for Quistis, and obviously we could only use these when we're in critical, but using aura or just kind of using the boost, we get access to these at all times. And she has some good blue magic, she has some bad blue magic, and she has some really OP blue magic, just being the one, which is the Shockwave Pulsar. You get this by using the Dark Matter item, and once you've got that limit break, you're going to be using that all the time with Quistis because it does insane damage and gets you through a lot of battles, especially in the late game. So overall, just looking at that one, I really like her blue magic list. She has some typical ones that we've seen before, like Aqua Breath, Bad Breath, White Wind, Mighty Guard. She has all of the blue magic traits, but I really think that the Shockwave Pulsar is the one you're going to be using the most once you've kind of unlocked it with the Dark Matter. But with Quistis being a character, you know, I didn't really vibe with her well, and there's a common trait and a little bit of a spoiler that when it comes to the general backstory of some of these characters, most of these characters, It's the same. They find out that they all grew up in the same orphanage, so therefore they've had the same background. It's only as of late, when we first meet these characters, that kind of makes them different. And Quistis, again, didn't really vibe with the kind of teacher thing that she had going on. So taking that all into account, and I know that I spoke more about her magic as opposed to her character, but there's not much to say about Quistis. There's not much of a backstory. You can have a few lines of dialogue here and there just to learn about her, or you can, you know, just little scenes here and there that involve her. You get little snippets of her. You know, she thought she was in love with Squall, and it turned out that that wasn't the case. It was more of a we grew up together kind of vibe, but she didn't know that at first, but because of the GF was messing with them. You know, it's all confusing really when I'm going into it, and I didn't really vibe with Quistis. So the story really brings her down for me. If it was just the blue magic alone and just Shockwave Pulsar alone, I would have put her straight up in S with a Squall, believe it or not. But I'm going to move her right down to C because the story kind of kills it. So let's move on to Seifer, and we briefly play as Seifer, and the limit break he has when we play as him is the Fire Cross, which has a few random attacks that can be triggered depending on the situation, I guess, but you know, we don't get to, you know, mix in with Seifer that much when it comes to combat. But as a character, you know, I really kind of like Seifer in a way. I do like his premise and the fact that he has Rajin and Fujian kind of like at his side at all times. I do kind of like that friendship that the three have, and that really enhances the good out of Seifer. But for most of the story, we're encountering him being manipulated by Artemisia. So we kind of just see the kind of, he's being controlled. He's not really getting much of him out there. He's just kind of clinging on that dream of being a sorceress's knight. So, whole thing considered, I'm going to put Seifer in B tier, I think. Or should I put him in A? No, I'm going to stick with B. So, let's move on to Zell, the hot dog lover, and when it comes to combat, he brought Jewel to the table when it comes to limit break. So here's a few of the attack names. We have Punch Rush, Booyah, Heel Drop, Mat Kick, Dolphin Blow, Meteor Strike, Burning Rave, Meteor Barret, Different Beat, and My Final Heaven. If you've played Final Fantasy 6 and 7, some of those names may kind of be familiar when it comes to Tifa and Sabine for some of those attack names, but he is our kind of punch master. We get more abilities as we get more Combat King guides throughout the game, and overall, you know, the bottom combination things are cool the first few times, but after that, not so much. It can be quite a chore to do. You just kind of don't really want to be doing it all the time. You're not going to be using Zell just to keep doing those button combinations. Zell as a character, though, he's like a typical annoying teen. He doesn't have any... The only thing I like about him is his relationship with his mother. It's really kind of like down to earth and very relatable, and just kind of his overall love of his town. They're the kind of charming qualities about Zell, and the fact that he loves hot dogs but never gets them until the ending of the game. A nice little funny trait. But I think for Zell, I'm going to put him on B tier along with Seifer, but just behind him. Does he go in front? Does he go behind? Well, I think we will go behind him. Next on the list is Selphie, and she has that typical trait that we'll see in Final Fantasy characters, really from Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII, it was Yuffie. Final Fantasy VIII, Selphie. Final Fantasy IX, Aiko. Final Fantasy X, Riku. Kind of like really kind of bubbly personality, very kind of, I don't know what the word I want to use is, but very high on life, very upbeat, and kind of always trying to make the party be its best that it can, just with their overall positivity, I guess. And she likes trains, so that, just based on that factor, she's probably going to be a D. But we have limit breaks to talk about, and she has some of the really cool limit breaks when it comes to slots. So she has that random mechanic that we get in some Final Fantasy games. And the 4 abilities that really make her shine are Full Cure, Wall, Rapture, and the End, being the most OP ability in the game. So that instantly would take her up to S. But as a character, you know, she still follows that trait of being in the orphanage, but we only get bits and bobs about Selphie. We know that she went to Trepe Garden, she was really involved in the school committee, she was really wanting to pull off these events, she pulled off that concert when it came to Squall and Rinoa in the Fisherman's Horizon, so that was really cool. She really does bring some cool things to the story, but not anything that I really resonated with. So, you know what, I think she's going to just end up in... She's going to be in the high B. She's going to be above everybody else that's in B at the moment. Just because, you know, the limit break, really, really OP. And she wasn't annoying as such. She did bring a lot of overall charm to the party. And that's alright with me. So now we move on to the Laguna trio. And, you know, when it comes to limit breaks, we're starting off with Laguna. He has Desperado, which is a really cool limit break where he kind of flies around with his machine gun, throws a grenade, and yeah, that's it. Not much to say about him when it comes to combat, but it's more or less his story. I really, really like Laguna as a character. I wish we had more of Laguna. If they remake Final Fantasy VIII, I want more Laguna. There is a kind of thing about him that's just, you gotta love him. He's really, really kind of funny, he can be serious, and he can control all of those emotions rather well. And to note, he is Squall's father at the end of the day as well. That never gets kind of revealed in full, but it's hinted at and kind of low-key confirmed right at the end of the game. Not much more to say about Laguna, except I'm pretty sure you'll all agree when I put him in the S tier, and he is going above Squall. Even though Squall's like the most relatable character for me, Laguna is just the most fun, and there's not a bad bone about Laguna in Final Fantasy VIII. So let's move on to his partners in crime, and we're starting off with Ward, and we might as well touch on his limit break, Massive Anchor. He just throws that anchor of his and does damage to all enemies, so the combat is just very generic, I guess, and that is the case for most characters in Final Fantasy VIII, but you know, each to their own. Now, Ward can be quite the quiet type, and that isn't any hinting towards later parts of the game. To be fair, that kind of made me chuckle inside. But he is kind of the quiet type. He worked in the D District prison for a bit, when he got away from the army, but not much is known about Ward, and that's one thing I wanted more of, is more of that trio. Even though we got a great look of their friendship, I don't think that we got enough of the trio. And for that reason, because we didn't get that much of Ward, he is gonna, you know, bang around here in C tier. And, you know, Kiros, they're kind of the same. Let's have a look at his limit break. He has Blood Pain, which is kind of like a slashing ability. Not much bringing to the table when it comes to that. But his story, again, we don't know much about him. He has a really kind of cool and out there outfit when it comes to his normal attire. But he doesn't really bring much. We don't know much about him, except that he's always trying to put Laguna on the right path or give him some kind of good advice here or there. So for that reason, he probably, you know, I think he kind of goes next to Ward there in C tier. So now we move on to Rinoa, our love interest in Final Fantasy VIII, and we should go over her limit breaks because it involves her dog Angelo, and she can fire him off her wrist on a boomerang-like device, which is pretty crazy. So if Angelo was a character in this tier list, I put him on S for that, just for bearing that kind of burden and being launched like that and still kind of bringing damage when it comes to battle. But Rinoa, you know, that's what we've touched on in battle, but as a character, we don't get that much of her really. Like, she isn't part of that rebellion in Timber, and she's the daughter of like the general in Daling City, and her mother is actually Julia, who Laguna had a thing with. But it all kind of links together, and then she becomes the sorceress, and you know, really tough to say. Like, very one-dimensional to a certain point. But, you know, she really brings Squall out of his shell and makes him the better character. And I think a lot of people will not agree where I'm going to be putting her, but I'm going to put her in A because she adds to Squall a lot. His character development and just the way he kind of progresses in the game when it comes to his character arc. Even though she isn't the best character herself, I think her addition in the story is good. Like, she is one of the key characters of the story. She isn't a side character. She is one of the main characters and the overall story of Final Fantasy VIII. So for that reason, she goes in A for me, and I don't think I'm going to change that. If you agree, let me know. If you disagree, I'm sure I'm going to hear about it in the comments down below. But we are now moving on to Irvine, our charmer, and the guy that overall kind of tells us what's going on in Final Fantasy VIII in amazing fashion. Like, hey, I think we all kind of recognize each other, but I think we know each other too. I think we all grew up in the same orphanage, and everyone's like, oh yeah. So, you know, he did bring that to fruition in Final Fantasy VIII, but his limit breaks, let's talk about it. He uses his gun. He's got normal shot, scatter shot, dark shot, flame shot, quick shot, hybrid shot, canister shot, and armor shot. Really cool things to use, just kind of like hitting R1 as fast as you can to get those out. I guess it's low-key kind of satisfying. But Irvine as a whole, he gets kind of brought out as this very confident gunsman. But when it comes to trying to assassinate the sorceress, he bottles it. He just can't do it. And maybe that has something to do with him knowing who the sorceress is, and he's wondering why everyone else doesn't, so he hesitates in that regard, or he's just not very good when it comes to the moment. But he does have a really kind of good vibe with him when it comes to the rest of the characters. He's constantly trying to bring Selphie as positive as he can, like trying to really help her out when she's feeling at her most down. So overall, Irvine's all right as a character, you know, and he's not annoying. I don't find him annoying. He tries to be the ladies' man in the game, but it doesn't last very long, though he tries again at the end of the game, and that ending sequence where he kind of talks to the other girls and kind of winds up Quistis in that little ending arc. Very funny, and you know, it definitely got a few smiles and chuckles out of me. And overall, just a very kind of entertaining character. So he is going to end up, you know, I'm going to put him in A. I'm going to put him in A as well. And, you know, considering his combat abilities, I had fun using the shots with the R1, and not many bad things to say about the guy. So we are finishing off our tier list with Edea, and she's our enemy for the first disc or so. We think that she's the bad person in the game, and we need to beat her to complete the game. But obviously things transpire. She is just a vessel in a bigger arc, and again, she falls into the category of being involved with everyone in the orphanage because she owns the orphanage along with her husband, Sid. So she falls into that kind of story of, oh, everybody knows each other. And she was the head. She was the one that everyone looked up to, and the one that kept everything going, and the one that came up with the idea of Seed, thanks to Squall going back in the past and telling her all about it before she got possessed by Ultimecia. It's a bit of a head mess when you really kind of go into detail. But Edea, you know, we'll touch on her limit break, which is Eye Strike, which happens to be the same kind of animation that she kills Squall with at the end of Disc 1 or the end of the parade. But, you know, not much out of battle for that. It's just really cool to use her after she has been an enemy for so long. But her as a character, I wish we got more. I feel like there was more to it. But again, it fell under the trait of, you know, she's pretty badass looking, but really kind of like the outfit choice when she is in her sorcerer gear. And again, I wish we got more of her. And I guess it kind of really rounds up this character tier list quite nicely, because all these characters are the same, bar a few, Laguna, Squall, Rinoa. All the rest kind of fit under that same category of kind of just being there for the sake of being there, kind of, but they kind of have their story arc. So for Edea, I think she is going to be going in high C. You're probably thinking, Jen, nobody's in D. Why is that the case? I don't really think anyone's awful in Final Fantasy VIII, so I don't think anyone needs to be in D. I think everyone kind of brings a little bit to the table, but with it having that major plot twist of everyone knowing each other and everyone growing up with each other, and Edea being the lead in that, you know, it's hard to really dive. I really wish we got more of the character backstories. I mean, we get snippets here and there of their history through maybe like logs or speaking to certain NPCs or going into the computer in Balam Garden. But apart from that, you know, I think this is probably where we're going to be at with the tier list. So you will have to let me know if you agree with that. So let's switch back to my beautiful face and kind of top things off with the finale of this tier list. Did you agree? Do I have a horrible opinion when it comes to the characters of Final Fantasy VIII? I would love to know in the comments section below. But there we have it, another tier list for us all to kind of debate and discuss about. I thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.